time to fix that computer thing. If you don't hear that joke 2 times, you won't know Justin very well today. We are thrilled to have Justin join us. It's a kind of funny little thing how you meet someone and then you find a connection. But Justin and I found about 10 yesterday on the trip from the airport to Weber State yesterday, including the fact that we had both been in London and lived there, and that his grandparents did when I lived there, which was a long time before he was there. We are grateful that he's come. He has traveled an interesting road in language acquisition, and because he lives in a world that relies a lot on how you listen and how you hear. He has had a series of people in his life that have made an incredible difference for him. And we are excited to hear his journey. And I want you to think about the individual people in his life that have made all the difference in the world for him. And recognize that you are that person for someone. Because everybody has their challenges, and they see their own limits. But he has a good message for you to push that beyond what you feel and what you think as a teacher, and the impact that you have on other people. So we want to welcome Justin and encourage all of you to get to know him a little bit better. There's a question and answer session after this if you'd like to collect his autograph or something fun. Okay, so welcome Justin Osmond.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it. You're awesome. All right, I'm gonna take this off. There we go. I'm the one kind of roaming around. I have ADD, so I have to keep walking. I might even come down here a couple times if that's okay. I feel like I'm too far away from you guys. Nancy, thank you for that beautiful intro. Appreciate that. Well, guys, it's good to be back here in our neck of the woods. My family is from Ogden, Utah. That's right. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. But as I was sitting there, I was reminded of an experience I had not too long ago. I was asked to speak in the Dallas Cowboy football stadium. And it was a big conference room overlooking the football field. And what it was a conference where all of the deaf and hard of hearing teenagers in the whole state of Texas were invited to come. And my job was to motivate these high school kids to go on to college. And a lot of you may not know, but deaf children don't always have the best confidence in themselves, and they have a low self-esteem. And so my job was to motivate these kids to keep going, keep continuing your education, and to go on to college, right? And the one thing that did motivate them was the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. That did get them excited. But I'll tell a funny story. As I was getting ready for my presentation, I got here a little early before everybody was here, and I was going through getting everything set up, and I noticed in the very back of the room, there was a young lady just staring at me. And so I ignored the lady and I continued with my preparation. But 5 minutes later, I noticed that she had worked her way up and she was sitting right here in the front row, kind of like where you're sitting, right? So I had to go, and just me and her in the whole room. And so I did. I walked up to the young lady and said, "Can I help you?" And she looked up at me and she said, "Are you an Osmond?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And then she said this, "Well, you don't look so good up close." So I hope I'm not scaring you. I know it's almost Halloween, but this is not my outfit. But I'm excited to be here to share some thoughts, some experiences, some stories about everyday challenges. And actually, you're right. I don't think anybody here in this room is exempt from your personal daily challenges, right? We all have them. And I think it's important to share your story so that we can all benefit from it. We can all get better from it, right? I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I feel like a postage stamp, right? I get licked, I get depressed, I get stuck in a corner, and then I get sent from place to place to place But I've noticed that I always succeed and arrive in the right place if I just stick to it, right? You guys ever feel like that sometimes? Yeah. Oh, thank you. And I think a lot of our students may feel like that. And perhaps, that's why we're here today. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of my amazing teachers that have made me who I am today. I am nothing without my amazing teachers. And sometimes I get a little emotional because I was a really difficult student. And I'll tell you some stories about that. But to get started, I want to start off with a question. Imagine life without sound for just a second. Imagine life without the comforting voices of your family and your friend. This is my little family. We just adopted 2 little babies. They're the love of my life. But just imagine not being able to hear when your babies cry. Last night, it's the first night I've been away from my babies for a long time, and I slept so well, not having to hear them cry. But imagine not being able to hear the comforting voices of your family. Imagine not being able to hear music. Who here likes music? Right? Everybody loves music. Who's a little bit country and who's a little bit rock and roll? Right? Imagine not being able to hear the telephone, the radio, the television, all these things that we take for granted every single day. Imagine if all that was taken away from you. Imagine life without sound. Imagine life without sound. For you, it might take some imagination, but for me, I've lived it. I know what it's like firsthand to live in a world void of sound. You see, I was born with a 90% hearing loss, a severe to profound hearing loss. And for 2 years, I lived in a world, no sound, no music, just people moving their mouths, right? And then when I became 2 years old, see, the technology back then, 40 years ago, they didn't have the newborn screening, right, like we do today. So they weren't able to diagnose me until I was almost 2. And then all of a sudden they find this out, so they hurry and put these analog hearing aids on me. And for the first time in 2 years, I was able to hear my mom's voice. I was able to hear my dad's music. And for the first time, I was able to hear the toilet flush. I've never heard the toilet flush, that sound that it makes. Little things like that I've never heard before. And growing up, it was hard. Going to school, this is what it was like back then. The technology back then is nothing like it is today. Everything's Bluetooth, But back then, I wore these analog hearing aids. And I was talking to Nancy. A lot of my teachers had to wear the little microphone around their neck. I'm sure many of you have had that experience. And I'd have the big box on my belt with the big hardware devices going into my ears. It wasn't cool. I stood out like a sore thumb. It was difficult. I felt isolated. I felt lonely. And I even felt disconnected. Perhaps many of you felt disconnected just a moment ago when you couldn't understand me. When I went mute there for a second, did you feel frustrated? Did you feel discouraged? And better yet, did you feel disconnected? There was a disconnection between us, right? That's how I felt a lot. Growing up and going to school and feeling disconnected from my classmates, my teachers. And that was a big, big issue for me. That was hard. I mean, how can you learn if you're not connected, right? And so, growing up, it was difficult. The technology wasn't quite the best. A lot of times it was like trying to explain to somebody what it's like. It's like a car radio. You know how you're going in between stations? It sounds a little bit kind of like static or distorted. You can't quite understand it because you're in between the channels. That's what it was like. In fact, last night, I went out to dinner with some wonderful people, the board, and some special guests. And it was really noisy in that restaurant. But I was able to carry on a conversation because I am a master at lip reading. I can lip read really, really, really well. In fact, I can, like you guys over there, if you're not careful, I can read your lips. But I've had to do that my whole life. And so it was difficult, like I said, growing up. But, as you know, technology has gotten better. But it wasn't always a matter of convenience. It felt like this a lot. I just, you know, it was so big and it was so overbearing. And it was really difficult at times. But like I said, technology has gotten so much better. In fact, I can hear so much better today than I did 40 years ago when we've gone from analog to digital. Right? In fact, I can hear so well, I can hear what you're thinking. Yeah, I'm just kidding. But it really has. And I've got to a point in my life now where I don't just love my hearing aids. It's like the air I breathe. But I also, I love my hearing loss. There's so many wonderful benefits that come from having a hearing loss. And as a result of that, I have a personal motto. I may have a hearing loss, but the hearing loss did not have me. Right? And that doesn't mean I don't like my hearing loss, because I love taking my hearing aids out. I love being able to just go into my own quiet world and get out of the crazy, loud world that we all live in. You know, my Uncle Donnie told me the other day, he said, Justin, I wish I could be deaf like you and just, you know, tune my ears out. So there's a lot of wonderful things about it, especially when your wife is yelling at you. You can turn them off and, you know, actually, don't do that. That doesn't go well. But then she knows sign language, and I know sign language, and so we have to communicate that way. But anyway, I thought I'd throw some things at you. Just out of curiosity, how many of you had to work with deaf children? Okay, quite a few of you. You know, they can be a challenge sometimes. Be grateful you didn't have me, because I was pretty difficult. But there's a lot of people out there in the world today that also wear hearing aids. It used to be that the deaf culture and the sign language was not accepted as a real language, but it's becoming more of the norm nowadays. I love that sign language is now becoming more, part of the language curriculum. They're providing ASL classes and stuff like that. So it's becoming more of the norm. But you'll be amazed how many people out there wear hearing aids. And here's just a few of them. Oh, and before I get there, my own family. Hearing loss runs in our family as well. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Osmond family. But this is my dad. He looks like Kenny Rogers. And then, of course, this is the rest of my family. But did you know that my grandmother, Olive Osmond, right here, which, by the way, they just grew up right down the street here, her two oldest boys were both born deaf. A lot of people don't know this. And after having her two oldest boys that were both born deaf, which is right here, Verl and Tom, her doctor told her not to have any more children, because he said that, you know, this is hereditary. I'm afraid that the rest of your children are going to be born deaf as well. But thank goodness she didn't listen to the doctor, and she had 7 more children. And I'm so grateful she did. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today. But it's an interesting story. I'll tell you an untold story of our family. One of the main reasons why my family got started in entertainment business was because they lived on a small dairy farm, right? And hearing aids, as you know, are very expensive. And they didn't have money to purchase hearing aids for their 2 brothers. So what did? They formed a barbershop quartet, and they started going out there and singing and performing so they could raise money so that they could buy hearing aids for their 2 deaf brothers. That is how the Osmond family got started in show business. Isn't that cool? A lot of people don't know that. And then, for the sake of time, I'll tell you another quick story. So, have you ever heard of do you remember the Lawrence Welk show? Yeah, okay. So, my dad was only 6 or 7 years old at the time, and they had a really great opportunity to audition on the Lawrence Welk show, right? So they got in their old station wagon here in Ogden, Utah, and they began the long trek out to California to audition for the Lawrence Welk show for the big break. When they get all the way there, and guess what? they got a call from Lawrence Welk himself saying, "I'm so sorry, I hope you haven't left Utah yet, but we just don't have any more room on the show. I really hope you haven't left Utah." And of course they were there. And you can just imagine how frustrated they were. This is like, oh, this is our big break. My grandpa, right there, one of my heroes, he was a Wyoming cowboy. He said, "You know what, guys? We could either get back in the car and drive all the way back here to Ogden, or we can go to Disneyland." And so that's what they did. They went to Disneyland. And if you've all been to Disneyland, you know that they have those open pavilion and they have those open music band playing, right? Well, it's custom in our family. Well, we all dress alike, right? Or at least they did. We broke that tradition. And so my dad, my uncles, they're all having the same shirt, same pants, and so they kind of stood out, right? Well, they saw this other barbershop quartet. They were called the Dapper Dans. You guys remember the Dapper Dans? They were another well-known barbershop group, and they were performing in the park, Disneyland. And they were right there in the front row watching these guys. These are like their role models. They want to be like the Dapper Dan. Well, the Dapper Dan kept looking into the audience, and they saw my dad and my uncle. And finally, they stopped the show and said, "Hey, do you guys do something? You look alike. You sing or something?" Like, "Yeah, we're like you guys." So they brought him up on stage, and they sang one song, and one song led to the next, to the next, to the next. And to make a long story short, guess who happened to be in the audience? Walt Disney himself. Walt Disney invited my dad and my uncles back into his office, and Walt Disney is the one that gave our family our big break. Isn't that crazy? We always think about, and we talk about it in our family, what would have happened? If something goes wrong, and they always do, right? We hit a challenge. Do we just go bitter, or do we get better? Do we get back in the car and just drive home? Or do we look for other opportunities, right? And so we've always wondered, what would our life be like right now? If my grandpa, who is the most optimistic man you'll ever meet, hadn't taken to Disneyland, where would we be today? We've always thought about that. But isn't that interesting? That's another untold story of our family. Another quick story. My grandmother, when she had her two deaf sons, she started a charity called the Osmond Foundation, and that was primarily set up to help her two deaf boys and to provide resources and educational materials for other families. Because remember, back then there was not a lot of information about how to handle deaf children. It's a lot better today, thanks to wonderful conferences like this, where we can come and we can gather great resources and tools. But that foundation, the Osmond Foundation, grew, and it continued to grow, and it's now known today as the Children's Miracle Network. You might have heard of the Children's Primary Hospital. I was started by my wonderful grandmother, Olive Osmond. So it's helped millions of children around the world now, and I'm so grateful for my wonderful grandparents and my family. But anyway, hearing loss runs in our family, but there's also many other people out there in the world today that you'll be amazed, and who also wear hearing aids. No, they don't wear hearing aids yet, but they will someday. But they're huge advocates for supporting the deaf and the hard of hearing. Billy Crystal, Kurt Russell, Kevin Costner, Buzz Aldrin, the first guy on the moon, Dick Van Dyke, I think that's how you say his name. Lots of other wonderful people, Chuck Norris, Sharon Osbourne, Willie Mays, Baseball Hall of Famer, and Warren Buffett also wears hearing aids. A lot of people out there wear hearing aids. And, a lot of it today is because of loud music over the years. But my all-time favorite, do you know who this guy is? Who is he? Lou Ferrigno, that's right. He's the Incredible Hulk. And he and I became really good friends. And you know why? He's also profoundly deaf. He also has a severe to profound hearing loss. And I love this photo. I have to point this out. But who is lifting more weights? Me or the Hulk? That's right. But you probably don't notice, I'm sweating like crazy, and he's not even breaking a sweat. But wonderful man, great role model. We should have him come and speak to you guys sometime. But he has a great story about overcoming his challenges. He was bullied. He was picked on as a young boy in school. And he wanted to prove himself. He went to the gym every single day and got bigger and bigger, and he is what he is today. A great role model for so many people, especially the youth of our day. So all these people that I just mentioned, everybody has a gift, right? And so do you. I've always believed that, and let me just share this next one. I shared this with my buddy Kurt Mata last night. He was telling me about his exciting things that he's got going on. And he's like, you know what? You have an amazing gift. And this applies to everybody here in this room. You're an amazing teacher, whatever your background is. You are touching or influencing the lives of these kids. And I've always believed that the meaning of life is to find your gift. And you found your gift. But now you got to go share it. And that's what you're doing right now. You're sharing that with your students. You're sharing that with your kids. You're making their life so much better. The quality of life is going to be so much better for these kids. And I love this next slide. It's not about you. The gift is not about you. Your amazing leadership is not about you. Even your purpose is not about you. What it's really about is serving these kids so that they can be influenced by your gift and your leadership and your purpose. You see that? And because of that, you guys are my heroes. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. I've had some of the most amazing mentors and teachers in my life. I was telling Nancy on the way up yesterday from the airport about her, and I said, should I share this story or not? And I think I probably should. But one of my teachers, remember I was telling you I was a really difficult student? So when I was 3 or 4 years old, I took 12 years of speech therapy. You probably noticed I have a different accent. Excuse me. But I went through so many different speech therapists and mentors and tutors and teachers, etc. But one of my particular speech language pathologists, I gave her the hardest time. It was one of my first time learning how to speak, and it was difficult. It was hard. Remember, for 2 years, I lived in a world void of sound. No language, no literacy, no nothing. And all of a sudden, they put me in the classroom, and I have to now start learning how to form a word and vocabulary. That was really difficult for me. So no wonder I gave her a hard time. But she worked with me for about 2 years. In 2 years, we moved. And she never really got to see me speak yet. Fast forward 35 years later, I remember talking to my mom. I said, Mom, I wonder how Carol's doing. She was my teacher at the time. I should probably go back and apologize for being a horrible student. And my mom's like, yeah, you probably should. Because my mom was there. And so, Mom, do you know where she lives? Because I remember going into her house. And so she said, sure, let's find out, let's see if she's still there. So we found her, we went there, and I remember knocking on the door. And remember, this is 35 years later, so she might not even be alive anymore. I remember the door open, and there's this old lady in a wheelchair. She comes up and she looks at me and says, who are you? And I said, I'm Justin Osmond. And then she said, you don't look so good up close. No, I'm just kidding. No. When I said my name, she started to cry. And then I lost it and I started to cry. And I did. I told her, I said, I just wanted to thank you. Thank you for never giving up on me and for being there for me. And even though I was a horrible student, and I have video to prove how horrible student I was. And I tried to make the video work, but it's not working. So I'll have to show you another time. But I'm just here to tell you guys that you guys don't get enough credit for what you do. And I promise you there will be times when your students, your difficult students, if you will, they will have an awakening someday. And they will come back and thank you for all the hard work and for never giving up on them. So thank you for being our heroes. I like to call it a hero. and for helping us be all we can be. So just a little reminder of how amazing you guys are. So thank you. Don't ever give up. And of course, my main hero was my wonderful, amazing mom. She was seriously my rock through all the hard times. But just to give you my schedule of what it was like. My mom, knowing that I am 2 years behind, okay? I'm 2 years behind. She knew she needed to do something. So she put me on this intense schedule. And I wouldn't recommend this on anybody, but this is what my daily schedule was like growing up. My mom would wake me up at 5:30 every day, and then we would have personal one-on-one speech therapy with my mom. And then after that, we did that for about 30 minutes, and then we had a 30-minute family Bible study. We had to read together. And then after that, I had to practice my violin for 30 minutes, and then I had to practice my piano for 30 minutes. And then we had family breakfast, and off to school we went. Of course, at school all day, we're learning how to read, and I have personal tutors at school that will work with me one-on-one. And then after school, I come home with a lot of homework, and a lot of times I would have to bring a VHS tape. It was a VHS tape back in the day that my teacher would let me take home so I could watch it at home because I couldn't understand it in the classroom. And then on top of that, I had to read on my own for 30 minutes. This was something my mom made me do. And then if there was time, and then I had to do my house chores. And then if there was time, I can go play with my friend. And then after that, my mom would always read me a bedtime story at night before I went to bed. That's a lot of reading. That's a lot of vocabulary and words. And it was very intense and almost a cognitive overload, if you will. But I needed that. I needed to keep going. But one of the stories, it's like still stuck in my head. But almost every night, she read me this story. You guys remember this story? The story of the blue choo-choo train. I think I can, I know I can, it's stuck in my head. I mean, she read it to me every single night, almost every single night. And I never understood why she would read this story to me every night until later on, I had my awakening, I grew up, and I realized that my mom knew, just like you, that you have this instinct. You know what's best for your kids or your students. She knew that I would have challenges to face. I would have mountains to climb. Like I said, challenges. She also knew that I would need to create a good, strong, positive attitude in life and a healthy perception of life. She also knew that I would be very confused. She knew that I would not have a whole lot of sense of direction when I get into the crazy world that we live in, where there's so much negativity, so much complexity going all around us, right? That I would be confused. And she knew I needed something to fall back on, right? Which is why that story comes into play. Have any of you ever felt like this? Or have students that have no idea where they're at, they have no sense of direction? Yeah, that was totally me growing up, trying to find the direction. And even today, I think we all feel like this at times. But my mom also knew that I would be bullied, which unfortunately I was, and that I would be called deaf and dumb. You've heard that phrase. That's kind of going away, which I'm very grateful for. But I was called deaf and dumb many, many times. And so that's not an easy thing. But my mom knew that I needed to come out of my comfort zone. Because if I don't get out of my comfort zone, the magic never happened. There's no spark. There's no miracles. I could never progress or grow. And that's exactly what you guys are doing. You're taking your students out of their comfort zone, right? And helping them be all they can be. And when that happens, this is what happens. This is what they look like. I was talking to Nancy and I said, Nancy, what's the most amazing experience as a teacher? And she said, I just love to see my kids succeed, right? And I love that about you guys. You guys, all you care about is helping these kids succeed and help them have a better outlook in life. Sorry about that. But this is kind of how I feel now. I feel like with all the wonderful teachers I've had, all the wonderful resources that I've been given, I'm able to see better, have a better direction and guidance in life. Because you're like the bridge builders so that we can walk across. And I think that is so critical. That's so important for you guys as teachers to help it. Because sometimes we don't know how. We're confused, like we said before. But because of that, you help us have a good outlook in life. And we, again, on behalf of all the students out there, thank you so much for helping us get to that point. All right, let me fix this. Is the AV guy here?
The AV girl?
There we go. There we go. I know what happened there. Okay, one of the things I learned is mental toughness, right? So this picture right here says 1,000 words, and let me just clarify. There were so many times I felt like this little girl. If you look at the picture close enough, look at her classmates, right? They're not even looking at the teacher. Why? Because they don't have to. They don't have to read their lips and then write everything down, write all their notes down. For me, I had to usually always sit in the front row, and I had to read her lips, right? And then I had to write it down, and every time I'm looking down, I'm missing everything that she just said. And then when she's writing on the whiteboard or the chalkboard, again, I'm missing out on everything that she's saying right there. Whereas all the other students, they didn't have to do that. They could be listening to music in one ear and listen to the teacher in the other ear and still writing their notes. And that taught me a lot of mental toughness, mental focus, and that's a good thing because it teaches us to work harder, right? I remember one time I was trying to get myself through college, and I worked in the front desk of a motel, answering the phone and making reservations. And I'll never forget, I picked up the phone, and there was this lady with a very different accent. And I'm sure, hello, I have a different accent too. I'm sure people have a hard time understanding me. But I asked for her credit card. And I wrote it down, but I didn't think I wrote it down right. So I had to ask for the credit card again. And again, her accent was so difficult, I had to ask for her credit card a third time. And I still didn't get it right, so I asked for her credit card 4 times over the phone. Would you feel comfortable giving your credit card 4 times over the phone? I mean, that put a lot of stress on me, you know, and that was mental toughness for me. I could have easily given up. I could have said, you know what, this job isn't for me. But I wanted to hang it in there and do the best I could. I threw this in this morning when I was preparing. I felt like this would be a good story for you guys in the education field. But when I finished my high school, I went on and I finished and I got my bachelor's degree. And it's not to say that it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. It was really, really difficult. But one day, I was doing a summer job. I was doing lawn care at the cemetery. Just wanted to earn a couple extra bucks with my brother. And he said, hey, let's go get our master's degree. And I just laughed. I was like, you have got to be kidding me. That's the last thing I want to do. But he says, no, let's go get our master's degree. We'll do it together. I'll be right by your side. I'll help you. And I said no. I said, no way. And it wasn't until maybe like 2 weeks later, I had that awakening thing, and I was like, okay, as long as you do it with me, I'm in. And we went through, this was a 2-year program that we did at Western Governors University. And this is my younger brother, okay? He finished, no problem, in 2 years. And here I was struggling like crazy. And here I am, I'm the older brother. I should be the smart one, right? And here he was, he just breathed right through it. And I went 2.5 years, and I'm still not finished. I had to keep retaking a lot of these quizzes and these exams. But my brother was right there with me the whole time. He was my teacher. And then it wasn't until a year later, this is now 3 years, I'm taking the exact same material that my younger brother took. And he could have easily have walked the stage and got his diploma, his master's degree. But he waited a whole year. Sorry, I get emotional. And we walked the stage together. And that was probably one of the most pinnacle points of my life. It was one of the best days of my life. And I share that with you because, again, I just threw this in the last minute this morning because I think you need to know that there are students out there that struggle, that they have a hard time, and there are challenges. But if you just stick with them, it's one of the best feelings in the world. And he's now one of my best friends. And it was just one of the best experiences of my life. But just so you know, and I'm not one to come up with excuses, but there was a research that was done that said that only 1/3 of deaf children complete high school. Out of the deaf individuals who attend college, only 1/5 complete their studies. Isn't that interesting? No wonder I didn't even know this. And when I was trying to get those high school deaf children motivated to go on to college, then you realize that their comprehension is much lower than a normal hearing person because they can't hear, they can't understand, they always feel disconnected. And so I thought that was kind of interesting, but it was one of the most difficult things I've done to this day. But thanks to wonderful teachers and a wonderful brother, a wonderful mom who helped me get through that. And here I was, get this, I'm in last place. I'm the last one to pass the test. I'm in last place, but yet they still ask me to give the commencement speech at graduation. That doesn't make any sense, does it? But here's the thing. It doesn't matter who finishes in first place. It doesn't matter who wins or crosses the finish line in last place or first place. The point is to help them get to the finish line, right? That's really the most important thing that we need to remember when we work with our students, is that we need to help everybody, leave no child behind, right? And speaking of my accent, I used to have a really hard time with my accent. Remember, I worked 12 years to learn how to talk, to learn how to speak, right? That's not easy. And here I am, I get people coming up to me all the time and they ask me, so where are you from? And they say, are you from Canada? Or are you from England? And I've had some people ask me if I'm from Australia. And I'm like, no, I'm from right here in good old Utah. So that was frustrating for me. That was really hard. I remember growing up in a musical family. I remember thinking to myself, man, I wish I had the golden throat like my dad or like my Uncle Donnie. I wish I could sing like Justin Timberlake, or I wish I could sound like Justin Bieber. But I realized, you know what? Why in the heck would I want to sound like Justin Timberlake? And why would I want to sound like Justin Bieber? I want to sound like Justin Osmond. That's me. That's who I am. That's my brand. That's my signature. And why? Because my teachers, all of them taught me that I'm just amazing just the way I am. I don't have to sound like Justin Bieber just to be amazing. I don't have to sound like Justin Timberlake, who I found out just doing the halftime show for the next Super Bowl. I want to sound like Justin Osmond. And I noticed that once I accepted that, I was so much happier with myself. And not only that, but people accepted myself for who I was too. And so my accent now, which I one time, I was very ashamed of it, I love it now. It makes me sound a little different, but that's okay. It's okay to be different. And you can tell your students that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I used to be voted in high school. This is in high school where you're supposed to be cool, right? I was voted in high school the shyest kid in high school. I had a really hard time getting dates when I had that title. It's not cool. But I was bullied. I was picked on. And I think I told you a little bit about that. And I was called deaf and dumb. And I felt like this a lot growing up. I felt very reserved. But I kept going back to that teacher train that my mom taught me as a young little boy. That was instilled in my head. I can do this. I can do this. I know I can. I know I can. And I know that tough times don't always last, but tough people do. And when we talk about that mental toughness, my mom and my parents taught me to be tough and to tackle those challenges in the world that we're all going to face, right? And once you do that, this is what it feels like. It feels like you can spread your wings. And you need to teach your students that. Boats were not built to stay at bay. Boats were built to go out to the sea, right? And to spread your wings. And to go out of this scarce mentality into this abundant mentality. And so, if we can teach our kids to do that, life would be so much better for them. And this is me, I felt like, when I was a little boy. I'd have people take my hearing aids out and play with it and throw it against the wall. It was just terrible. It does not make things right. And even though I was beaten up, I was not beaten. Even though they won the battle, I knew I was going to win the war. And sometimes you have to put up a fight sometimes. But we can teach our kids to be strong like that. And as a result, I knew that didn't make things right. And I wanted to, I didn't want other deaf children to have to go through what I went through. So I started this little anti-bullying campaign. And I go out there and I work with other deaf children and I let them know, hey, you guys are amazing. Not just amazing, but just amazing just the way you are. It's okay if your ears are just a little bit broken. That does not mean you have to stop doing what you want to do and go after your greatest dreams and aspirations in life. And so as a result of this anti-bullying campaign, I started a charity in honor of my grandmother, Olive Eisman. I was her favorite grandchild, by the way. And when she passed away, knowing how much she loved the deaf children, and especially her two deaf boys, I wanted to carry her legacy and her dream to keep helping deaf children around the world with the gift of better hearing. So if it's okay, I'd like to share this little video of these deaf children who light up like a Christmas tree when they hear for the very first time. And I've been to over 60 different countries. Thank you. I fell for you. Thank you. But keep in mind, as a teacher, I think you would appreciate this. Because the change that is wrought in these kids' lives, it brings a change to ours. It's called bringing music to your ears. Thank you. Thank you. That I've seen it 1,000 times, and I think it's a good reminder of the good work you guys are doing. And there's a really neat story behind this young boy. I don't know if you saw him in the video. He was just dancing away, and he was just so excited because he could hear for the first time. And I didn't get it on video, but there was a time where he was going like this. He's just doing that. I'm like, what are you doing? And we found out, remember, this is the first time he's heard, and he's like, I think he was about 4 or 5 years old, and he's never heard before. And what he was doing was, when he would go, ah, ah, he was trying to catch his own voice. Ba, ba. Isn't that crazy? He'd never heard before. And I was talking to the mother of this little boy, and with tears in her eyes, she was just so happy that her little boy could now hear. And she had no money, no resources. And I remember, I'll never forget, she turned to me and she said, and this was in India, by the way, and she said, is there any way you could take my son back with you to America? Not because I want to get rid of him, but because I love him so much. I want him to have a better life. And now that he can hear, he can go learn how to speak and reach his greatest potential in life. Of course, that hit me so hard, and of course I couldn't take him. I wanted to. But then, and of course she knew that, but she was just hoping. And then she said this, and this is something I want to leave with every single one of you here today that applies to everybody here in this room. She said this, I hope you never measure your life by the days you have lived, but by the smiles you leave behind. And I look at you guys, and like, that's exactly what you guys do. You leave smiles behind. When you work with these kids and these students, you're helping them leave with a better smile. I call them better hearing smiles with these kids so that they can have a better life. And so, remember that, you guys. Don't ever lose sight of that. And because of time, I'm gonna fast forward here. There's a lot of things I wanted to share with you today, but I'd be more than happy to talk to you afterwards. I believe we have a question and answer thing after. I can tell you some more stories. But I want to hear your stories too. I know you all have amazing stories. I'd love to hear them. But I want to share I brought this along just in case. I know we're a little bit country, and I know we're a little bit rock and roll, but we're a little bit of classical music too, right? I wanted to tell you that I was told that I could never play a musical instrument. I was told that I could never sing, which is partly true. I don't have that golden throat, and that's okay. I'm actually okay with that. But I always wanted to play a musical instrument, and the violin really stuck out to me. But then I started playing the violin day in and day out. I was putting all my faith, hope, and tenacity and mental toughness into learning how to play this violin. And then it just wasn't happening. I was flat, I was sharp, I had horrible intonation, I couldn't get the notes right, and it was so frustrating. I'm like, you're right. The world would yell at me, quit. You're deaf. You can't play a musical instrument, you can't hear it. But I wanted to keep going, and there's a quote that always comes to my mind, that where an ordinary man finds an excuse, a courageous man finds a way. Right? And that's who we are. We find a way. We find remedies, we find solutions so that our students can break through that barrier, right? And I remember one morning I was so frustrated with my violin. And by the way, my teacher, violin teacher, was frustrated with me too because I wasn't getting the notes right. But then she said, you know what? You can't hear the high frequencies very well, can you? I said, yeah, you're right. Well, why don't we switch it to the viola, which is a lower tone instrument, so you can hear the low frequencies better. Maybe you can get the notes right. And so I did. I switched to the viola. Nancy, right? She played the viola too. And so I started getting better at it, but I just was still having a hard time. And then I remember one morning, my brothers are playing the cello, my other brother's playing the piano, and I'm in this room and it's so loud, I can't hear myself play. And so you know what I did? I'll stand right here. I didn't want to hear my sibling play because it was so loud, so I turned my hearing aids off. So I turned my hearing aids off. Which gets rid of one problem. Can you still hear me? Because I can't hear myself anymore. I can't hear my brothers play their instruments, which is great. Now I'm back in my own quiet world. But I decided to experiment. And I put the viola next to my chin. And the most beautiful thing happened. I got outside my comfort zone, and this spark happened, this miracle happened, this pixie dust happened. And I was able to hear myself playing the violin, not by hearing it, but by feeling it. And that was my breakthrough. I learned to play this instrument, not by hearing it, but by feeling it, through the vibrations, through the conductive sound of this instrument. So with that, I knew that I could climb those mountains, I can walk those stormy seas, and I knew that we can accomplish or tackle any challenge that we can face. There you go. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wrote a book, talk a lot about my experiences, about hearing with my heart. There we go. Welcome to my world. No kidding. At one point in my life, I couldn't even read. I couldn't even write. I was telling Nancy that in 4th grade, I was reading from left to right, and I go to the next line, I'd read from right to left. I was very behind. But I feel like I'm still trying to catch up. I've always wanted to write a book, and so I did. I wrote a book with the help of a lot of wonderful people called Hearing with My Heart. And I brought a couple books along with me. If you'd like a copy, I can meet up with you afterwards in that question and answer. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. Perhaps you may be having some challenges with some of your students. I'd love to be able to talk to you about that and see how we can tackle that challenge together. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. You guys are my heroes. I appreciate everything you guys are doing. Keep up the great work. God bless you. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Will you come back up?
You want me to come back up? Okay. Thank you. So you want to stand behind the podium?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
You can stand over there.
Oh.
You're not too bad on the eyes close up. But I used to think that of Donnie too. How it goes.
And doesn't she look like Marie? I think so. Let's give her a round of applause.
He's got something for everything you say. Great. So, Justin, we would like to give you the certificate for presenting to us today in your name. We are going to give one of the people in the audience a member to the International Literacy Association in your name for you speaking today. So someone's going to
Thank
win a
you.
membership to the literacy organization. And Justin, this is Justin. I don't think you've met Justin Reed yet,
Justin.
but he's just in time too.
All right.
He's been saying that for like all night, just in time.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I am very happy to donate one of my books to your wonderful organization. So sometime throughout the day, if you would like to give it to somebody, you're more than welcome to. So.
Can I have it?
Yeah.
No, I'm
Sure.
kidding.
Of course.
Can I have one later?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay, the winner is Janice Johnson. Where's Janice Johnson? Janice, come on up. So, just shake some hands.
Okay, no problem.
So Janice, you get to shake his hand and see him up close, he ain't too bad. And
I'll give it. I'll give it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then you'll see Dr. Stewart, and she has a form for you to fill out to get that. So, Justin, thank you very much.
Thank
It was a
you.
wonderful
Appreciate it.
presentation. So his question and answer session will be right after it as well. So we'll have just a short break, and the restrooms are straight down the hall. The vendors are here, and then you can go to your breakout session.